A list of infringements and violations of rights. We cannot help thinking that an enumeration of some of the most open infringements of our rights will, by every candid person, be judged sufficient to justify whatever measures have been already taken, or may be thought proper to be taken, in order to obtain a redress of the grievances under which we labor. Among many others, we humbly conceive that the following will not fail to excite the attention of all who consider themselves interested in the happiness and freedom of mankind in general, and of this continent and province in particular. Seventhly, we find ourselves greatly oppressed by instructions sent to our governor from the Court of Great Britain, whereby the first branch of our legislature is made merely a ministerial engine. And the province has already felt such effects from these instructions, as we think justly entitle us to say that they threaten an entire destruction of our liberties, and must soon, if not checked, render every branch of our government a useless burden upon the people. We shall point out some of the alarming effects of these instructions which have already taken place. In consequence of instructions, the governor has called and adjourned our general assemblies to a place highly inconvenient to the members. In consequence of instructions, the assembly has been prorogued from time to time when the important concerns of the province required their meeting. In obedience to instructions, the General Assembly was, anno 1768, dissolved by Governor Bernard because they would not consent to rescind the resolution of a former House and thereby sacrifice the rights of their constituents. Eighthly, the extending the power of the courts of vice admiralty to so enormous a degree as deprives the people in the colonies in a great measure of their inestimable right to trials by juries, which has ever been justly considered as the grand bulwark and security of English property. We may be harassed and dragged from one part of the continent to the other, which some of our brethren here and in the country towns already have been, and finally be deprived of our whole property by the arbitrary determination of one biased, capricious judge of the Admiralty. Ninthly, the restraining us from erecting slitting mills for manufacturing our iron, the natural produce of this country, is an infringement of that right with which God and nature have invested us to make use of our skill and industry in procuring the necessaries and conveniences of life. And we look upon the restraint laid upon the manufacture and transportation of hats to be altogether unreasonable and grievous. Although by the charter all havens, rivers, ports, waters, etc., are expressly granted the inhabitants of the province and their successors to their own proper use and behoof forever, yet the British Parliament passed an act whereby they restrain us from carrying our wool, the produce of our own farms, even over a ferry, whereby the inhabitants have often been put to the expense of carrying a bag of wool near 100 miles by land, when passing over a river or water of 1/4 of a mile, of which the province are the absolute proprietors, would have prevented all that trouble. Tenthly, the act passed in the last session of the British Parliament, entitled An Act for the better preserving His Majesty's dockyards, magazines, ships, ammunition, and stores, is, as we apprehend, a violent infringement of our rights. By this act, any one of us may be taken from his family and carried to any part of Great Britain, there to be tried whenever it shall be pretended that he has been concerned in burning or otherwise destroying any boat or vessel or any materials for building, etc., any naval or victualizing store, etc., belonging to his majesty. Thus we are not only deprived of our grand right to trial by our peers in the vicinity, but any person suspected or pretended to be suspected may be hurried to Great Britain to take his trial in any county the king or his successors shall please to direct. Where innocent or guilty, he is in great danger of being condemned, and whether condemned or acquitted, he will probably be ruined by the expense attending the trial, and his long absence from his family and business. 11thly, as our ancestors came over to this country that they might not only enjoy their civil, but their religious rights, we cannot see without concern the various attempts which have been made and are now making to establish an American episcopate. Our Episcopal brethren of the colonies do enjoy, and rightfully ought ever to enjoy, the free exercise of their religion, but as an American episcopate is by no means essential to that free exercise of their religion, we cannot help fearing that they who are so warmly contending for such an establishment have views altogether inconsistent with the universal and peaceful enjoyment of our Christian privileges. 12thly, another grievance under which we labor is the frequent alteration of the bounds of the colonies by decisions before the king and council. This not only subjects men to live under a constitution to which they have not consented, which in itself is a great grievance, but moreover under the color that the right of soil is affected by such declarations. Some governors or ministers, or both in conjunction, have pretended to grant many thousands of acres of vacant and appropriated lands near a century past, and rendered valuable by the labors of the present cultivators and their ancestors. There are very notable instances of settlers who, having first purchased the soil of the natives, have at considerable expense obtained confirmations of title from this province, and on being transferred to the jurisdiction of the province of New Hampshire, have been put to the trouble and cost of a new grant or confirmation from thence. And after all this, there has been a third declaration of the royal will, that they should thenceforth be considered as pertaining to the province of New York. The troubles, expenses, and dangers which hundreds have been put to on such occasions cannot here be recited, but so much may be said, that they have been most cruelly harassed and even threatened with a military force to dragoon them into a compliance with the most unreasonable demands.